Tribe, Book 2, Todd Mills Mystery. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scrib Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 15. Todd woke, shivering with cold. What the hell had happened? When he heard her long, deep sob, he forced his eyes completely open, scanned the floor, but saw no one. Where was she? With his right arm, he pushed himself up, and a shock of pain zipped through his body. Holy shit! He hurt like hell. His head, his shoulder, his side. In a very unpleasant flash, he remembered it all, returning and finding the intruder. Was he gone? First, he looked down the hall and into the kitchen, saw nothing. Then he rolled over. The front door was shut, but the intruder wasn't about. At least he didn't appear to be, and there was Janice at the bottom of the step that led to the living room, her arms and hands wrapped around her ankles. Janice? She was curled into a tight ball, shaking. Todd looked at the back of her, saw that she was trembling ever so lightly. Are you all right? In reply, she threw her head back, opened her mouth, and this long, awful shriek exploded out of her mouth. Todd scrambled across the floor toward her. Oh, dear Lord, he remembered the gun. Had she been shot? Knifed? He scanned everywhere, but saw no blood pooling from her body. I'm here! He ignored all the pain that was spearing his own body, wrapped his arm around her. Her body was tight and rigid, as if everything in her life had been shrunk to one horrendous moment. Janice! He shouted. She opened her mouth again, and another wretched cry shot out. Todd clutched her, tried to comfort her. Checking her body, he saw no wounds, no evidence that she'd been beaten. Oh, shit, he exclaimed. Her wrists were bound to her ankles by thick tape, forcing her into a pathetic and immobile ball. He started grabbing at the tape, ripping it away, and it was then, of course, that he realized what was missing. His eyes darted around the living room. He saw a toy ball dropped by a chair, a rattle on the couch. Jesus Christ, where's the baby? Janice's face was clenched into an hysterical mass, tears soaking her cheeks, her hair. She opened her mouth, but only a mass of garbled noise as saliva emerged as quickly as he could. He tore the last of the tape from her, leaving her wrists a deep, painful red. Janice, what happened? He demanded. Where's Ripka? Unable to speak, she pointed to something on the floor. It was a piece of paper, a note, the handwriting neat, and the words direct. Todd grabbed it. Dear Miss Gray, we're sorry for taking the child in this manner, but it's imperative, of course, that she be returned to her natural mother. Do not report this to the police, nor pursue this matter in any way at all. If you do so, we will be forced to prosecute Zeb for kidnapping across state boundaries. This is exactly what he did, and we have ample evidence to prove it. To press this sad situation will only result in pain for all involved and certain imprisonment for the boy. Do not worry. The baby will be in the best possible loving care. Jehovah is watching her, and she'll be safe. A concerned group. There was too much that Todd didn't understand. Obviously, the intruder hadn't come for Janice's color television or her jewelry. He'd come for the mysterious infant, but... Todd reread the note, for there was plenty that didn't make sense. Todd rose to his feet and ran across the living room. How long was I out? When did he leave? 5 minutes. Something like that, she muttered, struggling to get up. Maybe more. I don't know. I'm not... Which way? Out the front? Yes. He peered out the window, searched the street. There were only 2 cars parked out front, Jeff's and his. But perhaps there was still time. Perhaps they could still catch the guy. The snow was so thick, the road so terrible. He couldn't have gone very far. Turning around, he saw Janice pushing herself to her feet and starting for the door. Did he say anything? Demanded Todd, hurrying after her. No! Was the baby okay? Did he hurt her? I don't know. Todd was right behind Janice as she hurled open the door. A blast of wind and snow hit them both, and they hurried outside. Todd still in his winter parka and boots, Janice wearing nothing warmer than a light sweater, her feet covered by nothing more than a pair of loafers. looking at the snow-covered walk. Todd recognized his own partially buried tracks, then saw another set leading down to the street. "Those are his," said Todd. They hurried through the nearly knee-deep snow, following the tracks across Janice's front yard to some short steps and down onto the sidewalk. Shielding his eyes from the falling snow, Todd checked the street, but saw no sign of tire tracks. Had there been no accomplice, no one waiting to whisk them away? Apparently not, for instead the footprints clearly turned right and continued up the block. As a huge gust of wind came up, Todd clutched Janice's hand and they followed the prints like a pair of bloodhounds, moving as rapidly as they could in the deep snow. They moved toward the corner where a streetlight illuminated the prints. Turning again to the right, now hurrying up a small hill, Todd could tell that Ripka's abductor had veered off the sidewalk. "His car must have been parked here," said Todd, pointing to the tire marks in the deep snow. "Oh my God!" Frantic with worry, Janice broke away and scrambled through the snow over the deep bank, along the edge of the road, then into the middle of the road itself. Slipping, nearly falling, several times she raced up the street, only to stop and look desperately around. Rushing after her, Todd saw that the tire tracks blended with those of at least 3 other cars. Todd turned around, trudged back to the place where the car had obviously been parked. Perhaps there were other footprints which would indicate how many people were involved in the abduction, and Todd did indeed find a second set of prints. But they were odd, disjointed, a scramble of tracks that made no sense. What the hell had been going on? Were there not 2, but 3 or 4 people involved in this? Then seeing a spray of red dots, he froze. Janice was quickly running toward him. "What? What is it? What did you find?" He bent into the snow, hoping that he was mistaken, that it wasn't what it appeared to be. Yet it was far too obvious to be anything else, and he realized his body filling with dread. It was clearly quite fresh. "Blood," he muttered. Janice rushed through the snow to Todd's side and stood there staring down at the scarlet drops. She bit her knuckle, started to sob. Todd rose, wrapped his arm around her waist. "It might not be from the baby," he said. "She might be all right. It could be his after all." Feeling her tremble with cold and fear, he pulled her closer. "Maybe he cut himself when we were struggling. Maybe I gave him a bloody nose, something like that." He looked up the street, through the sheets of thick snow. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Todd had believed the guy would still be here, that his car would be stuck or something, but clearly that wasn't the case. "Shit," he muttered as he shook his head, realizing there was nothing they could do. Not right there in the middle of that snowy street anyway. "Come on, we've got to get you back to the house before you freeze to death." "But we've got to call the police." She stood motionless in the snow, wouldn't budge, her chin trembling from cold and fear, and meekly said, "Don't you understand?" Todd's gut tightened. "Understand?" The baby!" He brushed some snow off his face and said, "What do you mean?" "I've just screwed up everything," she muttered, standing there as if she were in the middle of her living room instead of the middle of a raging winter storm. Taking her by the arm, he said, "Janice, we've got to get you inside. Come on. We'll call." "You don't understand," she shouted, ripping away from him and pushing toward a snowbank. "That baby's my granddaughter!" The wind gusted around Todd. The frigid air nipped at him. He turned, looked at the corner streetlight, saw the snow still falling in heavy sheets. You're what?" "I had a child, Todd, a boy. Ripka's my son's daughter." The storm vanished from him. His feet not cold, his brow not chilled with flakes. She said she'd slept with other guys, didn't she? After they dated in college? There were others, she claimed, perhaps a whole bunch. So what if she hadn't been the consummate dyke? It was only natural to be out there exploring the world, testing the waters, discovering what she really wanted. What the hell? He himself had sought a beautiful, intelligent woman and gotten married. I can't believe this," Janice said, turning away, strolling through the snow. I've just done everything wrong, made such stupid mistakes. Todd flashed back to that night at Northwestern right before Christmas break. Just how connected was he to all this? They'd been in bed for what, maybe 2 Carly Simon songs? When Todd felt it, the steering. Oh shit, it was working. It was happening. He was getting hard as he lay next to Janice in her room in the sorority. All the trials of the last week vanished, and he felt suddenly and unbelievably happy. This was what was supposed to happen. How things were supposed to go, wasn't it? He started kissing her, tasting her lips, her sweetness, as never before, and before he knew it, he was on top of her. He stared into her eyes, kissed her chin, her breasts, nibbling gently on one nipple then the other. It was all rather instinctual. Really, he was on top. She was opening herself to him. And then his penis was inside her, moving smoothly, warmly, easily. So this, he thought, is what it feels like. Nice. At first, he merely drank it in, savoring every second. But then as the intensity built, so did his purpose. Unbelievable, he thought. He was actually in bed with a woman. They were fucking. He'd actually been able to get an erection, and now he was inside her, and everything was going fine, even great. So he thought with a grin upon his face as he worked himself in and out of her and toward that ultimate goal. This could mean only one thing, couldn't it? That he wasn't gay after all. He remembered the stress, the pleasure, the joy, and relief that it worked. He could do it, could screw a woman, and he also remembered that the next semester Janice had disappeared, supposedly on a semester-long program in Europe, after which she'd come back, claiming she was a dyke. Suddenly he was shaking, not from the cold and the snow that was all around him, but from within. Something was coming into perspective. A truth was forcing itself to the surface. With the storm blustering all around him, in a hushed voice, Todd said, "So, you have a son?" And then he pushed himself to ask, "Tell me, Janice, is he our son?" "Todd, I've just done everything wrong." "Well, is he? I've got so much to explain." "Janice! It's so complicated!" "Damn it all, Janice!" "Todd, I've got to talk to him. It's not so..." "Tell me, Janice, is he my son, too, or not?" She stood in the middle of the street, the snow up to her knees and covering and clinging to her hair, her shoulders. She started to say something, then clamped her eyes shut. Wrapping her arms around her body, she squeezed herself tightly. Or was Todd wrong? Was she not trying to hold something in, but squeeze it out? Her voice strained. Janice finally said, "Todd, I'm sorry. I should have told you a long time ago. I wanted to, but..." She shook her head. "The truth is, I don't know." A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.